We're coming down here to one of my favorite new little hunting plots, and you know, obviously we want to take a small little intimate hunting plot. You can see we're going through this switchgrass. The switchgrass will be over my head here in just about a month, and we come into this little intimate plot. You think, this is pretty cool for a little hunting plot. We have a ladder stand right up here, and can't wait to hunt it. We actually came in here, and you can see the difference in height between this switchgrass right here and this over here. Is because we sprayed this with clethodim. This was a switchgrass area right here, and we took it out to put this nice little intimate hunting plot in here. Can't wait to hunt it. There's purpose in that. But I wanted to talk about not just this plot right here, but and how it hunts, the strategy behind that. We've talked about that in several videos for this. We call it Rhondas Plot, if you ever heard us mention that. But I wanted to talk about the purpose of this little food plot and how it serves to attract new bucks to the land. See, a lot of people, I think, are mistaken where you look at it that you want to, and I've even heard studies, and I'm not saying there's not something good about this, but it's kind of like if you shoot, a mother has twin button bucks, and you take the mother out of the herd, those bucks have a 70% chance of staying on the property. Now you can talk about inbreeding, and if there's doe offspring, fawn offspring that are does, and if they're breeding those, I'm not really sure about that. I'm not a biologist in that sense in any way to understand that complexity. If the mother's around, those doe or those bucks, those button bucks, whether they're twins or single fawns, will disperse about 90% of the time. A lot of areas, deer populations are too high. And not all areas. You go onto public land that's too low. I think their deer calculation methods for estimating population are really off. Whatever models are being taught, they might say that we go out to Allegheny National Forest, they might see there's 15, 18 deer per square mile. There's probably 7, 8, 10. I'd really love to see them get into infrared drone surveying so they can actually sample size areas and count the actual bodies and project that out to actual population. That's a different story. But when it gets in these population numbers, you look at deer numbers are too high in a lot of areas, especially areas that you can try to build and manage a herd like we're in. And for that, if does are not being shot, then those button bucks will disperse, or yearling bucks with their first set of antlers will disperse about 90% of the time. That's opportunity for you. Think about it. And it relates to this small little hunting plot here a lot. And I've seen this for about 25 years since managing up in the UP in Michigan. But think about those little bucks, whether they're a yearling at a 1.5 years old or a fawn. Yearling and fawn are not the same word. 1.5 years old yearling refers to a 1.5 years old that you see in the fall, and a fawn was born that year, 6 months old. But regardless, depending on the area, a high winter yarding area, they need to know the migration route, need to be taught that, then they'll disperse typically as a 1.5 years old. In big ag settings where there's no winter kill, they don't need to be taught those areas, then a lot of times they'll disperse. They can disperse as a button buck, fawn buck. They're dispersing, and the average dispersal distance is about 1.5 miles. So think about it. These bucks, whatever age, 1.5 years or a fawn, have just been kicked out of the herd because of female social pressure. The last place those dispersing bucks want to find is an area dominated by female social pressure. Big food plots, lots of does and fawns that hang around during the summer. You have a window and an opportunity in the entire neighborhood to collect a high percentage of dispersing bucks, because most people manage for summer food sources, lots of does and fawns, and they don't have nice little hunting plots like this. The hunting plot like this is really key. And I started seeing this in the UP in Michigan 25 years ago. I'd have a smaller plot than this. This might be 1/10 of an acre, 1/8 of an acre at the most. And we'd see a 1/10 of an acre, 20th of an acre plot. All of a sudden, for 3 weeks in a row, almost every day, I see a little brat pack of spike bucks that are 1.5 years old residing in and around that food plot. That was their place they dispersed to, and they call it home. They call it home because there's no does and fawns there. They're all out in the bigger fields. They're out in the ag fields. They're out in the bigger food plots, more diverse food plots. That little 1.5 year old buck or fawn that's dispersing is happy to take over a little area like this and call it his home. Now we have 18 acres of plots out here. We have about 14, 15 different plots. So we have these tiny little plots. For one, we like to hunt them, but they serve dual purpose, because when that dispersing yearling buck or fawn buck is coming through in the area, again, they disperse an average of 1.5 miles, and I don't believe that's a straight line. I don't believe they just go one direction and that's it. I think they fan out over a very large area, and they're moving. They don't know where to reside. All of a sudden, they come into a little place like this, maybe a little corner of a big food plot where they can call them their own. Maybe a small little apple tree somewhere that's off by itself where they can have some food. It's adjacent to bedding areas that aren't overrun by does and fawns, and they stick and they stay. UP in Michigan back in the day, when we first started managing that, or I did in 98, 99, I had cameras out, and in that first year, we found one rub, one scrape, got one picture of a spike buck. Hardly any deer. We could go on 2.5 miles of sand trails for 5-6 days and not even see our deer track after a rainstorm. It's kind of disheartening. But I learned quickly that you build a herd, and this is based on John Azogo, is someone I talked to a lot, a deer research biologist, famed, most peer-reviewed articles out of anyone ever in the country. I learned a lot from him. And one of the things I learned is those dispersing yearly bucks, they disperse average of 1.5 miles. But you don't build your buck numbers by attracting a bunch of does and fawns, shooting the mothers, and expect bucks to stay around. You can build your deer numbers, especially your buck numbers, by collecting, dispersing yearling bucks. I'll give you an example on that property. We saw one spike that first year. Fast forward to 2006. I had 17 pictures of 17 different bucks, passed up 11, shot 2. So I had seen 13 different bucks from the tree stand. We had an average population of does at that time, of probably about 5-6 does. They would have on average a half a fawn per doe. Now we had better fawn survival rates in the property because we gave them a lot of food going into the winter in the form of quality food plots, and then we gave them food immediately when they returned from the deer yards in the form of rye. So that really helped them recover and build up before the season. So we had a little bit higher survival rate and fawning production than most, but in the area, it was half a fawn per doe, fawn recruitment going into the wintertime, and half of those are bucks. So it took 4 does to equal 1 buck. You can imagine on my property back then in the UP, to build deer numbers and especially buck numbers, pretty darn difficult, because if you just relied on those button bucks that were born by those mothers, you're getting 1 out of 4. We only had 5 or 6 does. So think about that. You go over a 6 or 7 year period, and all of a sudden we had that explosion of buck numbers. I built those buck numbers by capturing the dispersing yearling bucks. The cool thing is hardly anyone's doing it in the neighborhood. Big giant food plots, overrun with does and fawns, lots of summer food, not going to happen. UP Michigan, we had 14 different plots totaling 8 acres. 1/10 of an acre, 20th of an acre, 1/4 acre, little outside corner of an end. All those areas were ripe for collecting dispersing bucks. You know, while we're talking about this, and I hate to interrupt, but we have our food plot seed company, Pure Wildlife Blends, and I want you guys to have some great plots, and it's getting to planting time. July is our biggest month for people buying. 1st of July, we're focusing on a rut zone. When it gets into the end of July, we're focusing on our Big Boost Brassica, our Big Boost 365, our Fall Power 365s. Those are some of our biggest offering. We're standing in our PPP, our perennial plot power. So those are some of our favorites. Urge you to check it out. Let's get back to what we were talking about, but appreciate you guys checking this out. Those are a few of my favorites, but we have 19 offerings. So we built that buck herd up there, no different than how we build it here. You know, on this property, 255 acres, we get pictures annually of over 40 different bucks. Those bucks that come and reside, especially those youngsters, again, they're not born here. I could really care less about the ones that are born here. I want to capture the 5 or 6 or 7 times opportunity that's out there that are actually born here from dispersing bucks in the neighborhood. Hardly anyone else is doing it. So you can be that one property. And it all goes back, if you're managing this way, it all goes back to being in that 5% club. 5% of landowners are going to do it this way. 5% of the landowners are going to manage, give the deer enough depth to bed, small food sources for dispersing yearling bucks, room for mature bucks, not too many does and fawns during the summer. 5% of the people are going to do that. Great opportunity for you, the ones that actually study this and do it, because then you'll find over a 10-year period, you shoot 80% of your target bucks and the best bucks in the entire neighborhood, which is what we've been doing here for the last 5 years. This will be going into our 6th year. We still hold that true anywhere you go, because if you put these pieces in place and you follow these concepts, they're not made up. They're based on biology. They're based on dispersing bucks. And when you follow these, and it's just a matter of doing it. It's nothing magical. Once you do it, you will be successful. Yeah, if you want to grow your buck numbers, go ahead and take that doe out that has a couple button bucks. Maybe it'll stick around, not a big deal. But the whole thing is you have several times more opportunity by creating a property that's inviting for those dispersing bucks, and that's how you build a buck herd. And then if you don't pressure it, you have the right food sources that last the hunting season, you're not putting too many does and fawns in your property during the summer, taking up space, then those bucks will stay. Those older bucks will stay. And not only will you have older bucks, you have a great herd, a balanced herd. That's how you balance a herd. You don't do it by the quality of the food you plant, the switchgrass. It's more of those concepts that have to do with how deer relate to each other, how they relate to hunters, the amount of pressure you put on your land. And all this stuff is the icing on the cake to an already good focus of an alignment, no different than a good house. You're building it. You have to have a good flow of that house. You have to have a good flow of your land. Make it attractive for dispersing young bucks. Watch your numbers explode. Let me know about it in the comments below. Appreciate you following. And if you follow that advice, you're going to be on the right track to being in the 5% club within your neighborhood.